A teacher fired for reading a passage from a famous book? Sounds insane, right? Well, unfortunately, that's exactly what happened to our guest in this episode, Matthew Mastronardi. He simply read a passage from the book To Kill a Mockingbird to teach his students a valuable lesson. Afterwards, there was a great deal of controversy that led ultimately to him not being renewed with the school. Check out his insane story in this episode and what it means for the state of American education. Episode 116 starts right now. Matthew Mastronardi, welcome to the Present Fathers podcast. So right up front, this is going to be a pretty interesting episode because you were actually fired from your teaching position. Why was that?
I like to say that I committed blasphemy, and the overlords of our society, which tell us what we can and cannot say, and the cultural winds. I upset somebody, but I said a naughty word essentially.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we will get more into that, but why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your family, kind of where you're from, and then from there, let's dive into the controversy that ended up getting you removed from your position.
Yeah. Well, I'm really thankful to be here, George, Dustin. Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be with you today. I live in Spokane, Washington, born and raised here. I'm married, have 3 beautiful children, a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 6-month-old. So we stay very busy.
Oh, yeah.
And, we got chickens and gardens and, just trying to, do a little bit more of the homestead stuff. And yeah, I was a school teacher for the last 3 years. A little bit before that, I was in the Air Force. And so I did 4 years stationed out at Joint Base Andrews in like the Maryland, D.C. area. But yeah, I grew up here and glad to be back. But yeah, the last couple of months have been a little hectic.
What'd you do in the Air Force?
I was a medic, so
Nice.
I worked in hospitals, took care of active duty patients and their families, and yeah, that was pretty cool.
Very cool. And then you just went straight into teaching after that?
Yeah, so before I joined the military, I had graduated with a teaching degree, and I was about to go into teaching. But I just had this last minute sort of desire to do something really different. I've always had a deep sense of duty and patriotism and wanted the chance to travel a little bit. And it ended up being a total God thing that I joined because it altered my entire life. And, I ended up meeting my wife out on the other side of the country. I could have never predicted that. And, but it was really cool. I got to shake Donald Trump's hand one time at when he signed the Space Force into law. I was actually standing right behind him on stage because they always do these events at Joint Base Andrews.
Yeah.
That's where Air Force One is parked. And so, a lot of military bases, if they hear that a 2-star general is coming, the whole base is on high alert.
Oh, yeah.
But we had presidents, heads of states coming in and out every day. And so for us, it was like, oh, there goes the president again. It's no big deal. But yeah, I was selected. I got to stand right behind him. And
That's pretty cool.
yeah, I wonder if I actually, yeah, I can prove it because I have this pen.
He brought the receipts.
Yeah.
Hey, look at that.
Yeah.
That's
So
pretty
funny
rad.
story. As the president was leaving, his desk was still there, and he's got a whole box of these pens.
Oh, yeah.
And 4-star general, his chief of staff of the Air Force at the time, it was General Goldfein. He leans over and whispers in my ear. He's like, "Nobody's looking at the pens." And so I went over and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna go take one." And then Secret Service stopped us, and eventually they said, "Okay, fine, you can have a pen." But it was one of those just you would never get that at any other base. But
Oh, yeah. No way.
experiences all the time. It was really cool.
Yeah. We had, I think because I was stationed at Fort Campbell, we had the president land here one time, and it was the exact opposite. It was like, stay away, shut everything down, don't go on these roads, get all the grunts away. So that was under Obama though, so maybe be different. But anyway, yeah, very cool, man. That's I'm jealous. I don't have one of those pens, so that's a pretty cool memento to take from your time in the Air Force.
It was really cool. Something I'll never forget for sure. And
Oh yeah.
my mom, she was watching it live on TV, and she calls it my Forrest Gump moment.
Now, did you get shot in the buttocks, or was
Yeah.
that?
No, that did not happen, but everything else.
You didn't drink so many Pepsis or whatever it was that you had to go to the bathroom. Anyway, uh, that's awesome, man. All right, well let's get back to you and your actual story now. So yeah, why don't you just walk us through, starting the teaching job, moving back home to Washington. I'm assuming that was probably pretty exciting for you to be able to move back home and kind of start the next chapter of your life. Were you already married while you were on active duty, and did you have kids
Yeah.
before then, or kind of where were you at in your life?
Got married in 2020. It was the height of COVID, and had a very small wedding. 10 people were allowed to come. It was totally bogus. But then the very next year is when I got out of the military and we moved back to Spokane, and we had a 2-month-old at the time.
Nice.
All
And
right.
so, what drew you to teaching? What made you feel that I'm going to be a Spanish teacher? Like, this is going to be my calling?
Yeah, I mean, so I was never a great student when I was growing up through high school. I was terrible. But I had two parents that loved me, and I think is what gave me a little bit more of an advantage to some of my peers. And I eventually just started taking some classes at the community college, and I eventually graduated, and I was like, okay, what am I going to do? And I don't know, I just sort of fell into teaching, and I always liked working with kids and students and helping people learn. And so I figured maybe it's not what I do for the rest of my life, but for this period of time, I'm going to, be a teacher. And like I said, I put it on hold while I joined the military, did that for a few years, came back, and jumped right back into teaching. And so for 4 years, I was a teacher. I did 1 year at an elementary school, and then for 3 years at the high school here where I was just at. And it was really cool because my brother, he was also a Spanish teacher. So I teach Spanish. That's what I taught. My dad is from Argentina, and so I grew up in a bilingual household and speaking Spanish and English. And so Spanish kind of came easily to me. But it was really cool because my brother worked right across the hallway. And we were both Mr. Mastronardi. And, the first day of school was always really confusing because his kids would come to my class, my kids would go to his class. And we had a really cool, like, cultural thing there. And spent 3 years teaching there until, recently.
All right. Well, so why don't you walk us through now the details of what actually happened, where the controversy kind of started, and obviously, didn't really go the way you wanted, I'm assuming, but yeah, let's dive into that, man.
Sure. Yeah, so it was just another day. It was sixth period, and I'm just pacing around the room as the kids are working on an independent assignment. I've already kind of taught the lesson, and now they're just independently working on an assignment. And I overhear this conversation between these two students, two girls. They're talking about the book To Kill a Mockingbird. And I overhear that they said that they have to skip over, I'm not going to say the word here, but they have to skip over the N word, right? Nigger, right? It occurs in the book almost 50 times. And when I heard that they said that they have to skip over the word, I just thought that was interesting. I said, really? You have to skip over the word? Like, you're assigned to read the school-approved book, and, it undermines the historical context. You distance yourself from what the author intended you to read and to feel, and you really miss an opportunity to confront the ugliness of that word. And, you're missing an opportunity for a teacher to sort of help you understand what it means, to help you think critically about it.
And can you, just for maybe people who haven't read it, can you kind of just explain why that was contextual to the book?
Yeah, so it's about racial injustice, and there's a little girl, her name's Scout, and her father is defending a black man who was falsely accused of rape. And so you sort of see this justice system from a really long time ago, and it's really set up to against this man. And there's a lot of racism involved, and so using that pejorative word at that particular time in history, it depicts what life really was like.
Right. And so it's the character saying it, right? It's not glorifying those people as
No,
good, right? It's
to the
showing
contrary.
how it was bad, right? So,
Yeah, if anything, the book, like I remember there's one line in the book where Atticus Finn, she's the father, he actually tells his daughter not to say that word.
okay. So
Yeah,
I just want that to be clear for people who may not understand the
yeah,
context of the book. This isn't like a pro-racist, propaganda piece or something. Considered to be one of the most impactful works of modern literature, at least from my understanding. So,
yeah. The book is a
yeah.
work of art for sure. And I overheard these girls saying that, and then so I just saw it as a teachable moment because these students, so often in public schools, they're just given tasks to do all day, and any real thought-provoking conversation, like there's not a lot of it. And so I've always strived to be meaningful and authentic with my students. And look, I know I'm not the greatest teacher in the world, but I've always tried to meet real student curiosity with real context. And if there's a thought-provoking question they have, I'm not going to slam the door shut in their face. So anyways, a girl said, well, Mr. Mastronardi, if you were reading the book, would you say the word? And I said, yes, if I was reading from the book To Kill a Mockingbird, I would say every word. And that's where all of this really kind of erupted. I did not intend for it to go beyond that. But right then and there, a boy in my class who has come to really respect me, and I think he sees me as a role model and somebody he can try to emulate, and sees me as somebody with integrity. And he just looked at me, and he comes up to me. He says, he has the book. He whipped out the book. He went to the page, and he says, "Okay, do it." And that was when I kind of realized I was past the point of no return. Like I did not wake up wanting to be in this situation, but I went off script a little bit to meet student curiosity, right? Teachers engage students in those teachable moments all the time, right? Like, it's not like I've received a lot of criticism. People are saying, well, you should just teach Spanish and you should just do nothing else. And why are you even talking about this? And, those people have never really spent time in a classroom. When you try to cultivate meaningful relationships with students, like sometimes, they ask a thought-provoking question about something deep and true and about the world. And like, if we just slam the door shut in their face every time, like that's not what I'm trying to do. So I read a passage from the book that included the N word, and I tried to make it a teaching moment about context. Like your words, like, how do I want to say this? Like, your words, there's context to your words, right? Like the intent
there's intent behind how you say things.
Yes, and you're not a racist if you read from a book. If we should be able, a sane society should be able to look at somebody reading from a book and then somebody using a word with malintent or with hate in their heart, and be able to see the difference between those two scenarios, right? Like, you shouldn't, if you're reading from a book and you just have a total emotional collapse upon hearing a word, like, that's not healthy either. Like, let's not we can't run from history. We have to confront it even when it makes us uncomfortable. And so, yeah, that got me fired essentially.
So they like reported you, or like what happened?
Yeah,
Like,
so that's good. Sorry, I skipped that part, I guess. Yeah, a girl was recording, and she had her phone out. I didn't see it. I didn't know I was being recorded, but then that video circulated around the school, and it made its way up to the administration and the school board. And then eventually I was verbally reprimanded, and then I got served papers of non-renewal that I would not be having my contract renewed. mind you, I've never had a single disciplinary action before this. I've passed every teaching evaluation, excuse me, and there's never been, like, to my knowledge, any formal grievances or parent complaints against me. And so, it was just like an avalanche. I violated a standard that the progressive secular forces that govern our culture, I offended them, and I think they didn't like that I spoke the truth to the students. And it eventually, this last Wednesday, we had a school board meeting, and the school board voted to not renew my contract.
This episode is brought to you by Pre-Sleep. Hey there, my name is George Hayworth. I'm a husband and father and an entrepreneur. I work out a lot. I like to stay physically fit and active. And one of my secrets for how I stay so healthy and get so much done isn't because I'm some awesome guy. It's because I use Pre-Sleep. Now, this product is one of my personal favorites. It's probably the best supplement in my cabinet, and that is because it's 100% pure and natural. All the ingredients are made right here in the US of A, and the product is based around magnesium, L-theanine, and glycine, and these three work together to help you fall asleep faster and stay asleep longer. And then on top of that, it increases the quality of your sleep. So it is a triple threat when it comes to optimizing your sleep. And my favorite thing about it is that there's no melatonin, so it's not habit forming or anything like that. And there's no sugar whatsoever. So it is super simple to use. You just take one scoop, put it in a glass of water, stir it up down the hatch. I do it about an hour before bedtime, and I sleep great. I have no issues getting to sleep, staying asleep, and I track it on my watch. It tells me how good my sleep quality is, and it is exponentially better when I use my Pre-Sleep. So what are you waiting for? Go check it out. Sign up today, get yourself a tub of this, and you will never look back. Your best sleep is waiting in this bottle of magic right here. Get 10% off at checkout by using the code GEORGE10. That's GEORGE10, or tap the link in the description below.
So, Matthew, would you do it again if you knew what the consequences were going to be? You had a crystal ball and you knew that this situation was going to happen, and that student dared you and said, hey, I want you to read this book. Would you censor yourself at this point, knowing the consequences, or do you think it's so important that we have these conversations that you would do it again?
Man, I think I like to frame it like this. If you put me back in that situation, it's hard to decide like what I would do if I knew all the consequences and all the stress that it would bring. But I don't have any regrets, because our students are, like, our culture is so deprived of courage. And like I had a conversation with somebody who helped me articulate this. He said, look, it's not about a word. It's not about that you read a passage. It's about your ability to tell the truth. And like, these kids need you to stand up and pick this fight, even though it seems silly. Like you read a word from To Kill a Mockingbird, but like, they don't really get courage put on display very often in a meaningful way that's right in front of them. And so I think for them to see that I was a man on my word, and I'm sticking up for the principle of like free speech, free expression, authorial intent, reading books as written, and they know I'm not a racist. Like they know, and they are sort of seeing the true colors of a system that is more concerned with compliance than it is education. And I
Right.
think as long as that is seen for what it really is, this feels like a victory, even though I didn't get my job back.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to commend you, brother, because this is something I teach aggressively in my men's program, is that one of the core pillars of manhood is being a warrior, and oftentimes the warrior today is exactly in situations like this, standing up for the truth. It's morality, it's virtues. It has nothing to do with how hard you can fight, right? And yeah, this is the battle that has to be fought, because if we don't, where does it stop, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many generations are we just going to keep passing the buck? And that's what happened. We only got to this point where you're in this position because how many men before you were too afraid to say, yeah, I hear you. I know you're upset about it, but too bad. Like, we're not going to dishonor academic integrity and curiosity of thought and wanting to understand the past and context and things like this that every adult needs to be able to do to function in the real world. Yeah, props to you, man, because this is exactly the shining example of what I describe as the warrior pillar in action, because it's not on the battlefield, right? Our battlefield today is most often the twisting of meanings of words. Mm-hmm. So I just want to kind of give you that props there, and it's inspiring me, and I'm getting fired up over here because how many more men need to be doing what you did? So yeah, there's costs sometimes, right? Standing for truth and standing for justice comes with a cost, usually a lot of the time. However, if we look at what's been happening for these people who have stood up across the board the last couple years against some of this insanity, yeah, they take it to the chin for a while, but as far as I can tell, most of them have actually come out far ahead on top. So I'm hoping this is just the next little step in your character arc to where you're going to be rising above it all. And obviously we want to support you in that, but yeah, just nothing more to say other than it's just really inspiring to see that, because I think people in any position of authority today need to stand up against some of this insanity that's happening. And like you said, we're just forcing and teaching children to just be compliant and to just adhere to whatever they're told to do. And that's a very dangerous thing, right? If you disagree with me, like you have different beliefs than me, that's great. I want you to be able to defend them and think why you have those, and not just because someone told you.
Yeah, I could not agree more, and thank you. Something that keeps resonating, and I'll keep repeating it, but like, if we allow kids to only read every approved word, right? They read everything that's approved, but they have no understanding of how we got here. And if you don't have understanding, a cycle can repeat, and you might end up just perpetuating exactly the thing that you don't want to happen. So it's important that we don't use bad ideas, but we expose them, and we
Correct.
drag them into the light where they belong, and we can wrestle with them, and we can, most importantly, understand them. And that's really what all this is about. And there's consequences to distancing yourself from the truth. At our school, there was a girl who took second at state at the state track and field championships. Well, she lost to a boy 2 years in a row. To the same boy a boy who thinks he's a girl, and she lost to him twice. And it made headlines. Riley Gaines was tweeting about it, but the people who disagreed did so silently and abandoned the issue altogether.
Where are all the dads, right? See, like we've talked about this years ago. We had a situation like this on the podcast, and that's my first question: is where are all the dads saying, "Yeah, tough. Like this is ridiculous." I mean, if that started happening to my daughter, I mean, I am not going quietly, not even close. So yeah, I just don't understand how all these dads can kind of just like let that be happening to their daughters.
And I think there is some backlash, at first, but we're too quick to give up. It's like, why are we not voting these people out? Why are we not showing up to these meetings? And we're not going to settle until it's over, until things have changed. And it's like, but we have to be comfortable to speak the truth even when it's uncomfortable.
And it's so important that we don't allow ourselves to live in a post-truth world. I remember that famous moment with Jordan Peterson where he was asked why, this might hurt someone's feelings, and why is the truth more important than this person's feelings? And he said, the truth matters, and we have to have a standard of what the truth is, or everything falls apart. And I think that was a big moment for a lot of us, realizing that, especially now with large language models that are hallucinating and spitting out fake information. I mean, who knows? Maybe all the copies of books that matter start disappearing, and all we have is these large language model analyses of books. And maybe in those new models, everything is sanitized, right? And so it's a newer version that won't hurt anyone's feelings of To Kill a Mockingbird. And what does that do to a society and a generation when we don't have the truth, or we don't think that the truth matters?
Yeah, I think kind of like what I said earlier is like you allow cycles to just perpetuate and you don't end up learning from the past. And the truth is not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to make us uncomfortable. And but that's where freedom has to start is with the truth. You can't have real freedom unless it's based on the truth.
Well, and what we're doing is we're just breeding a generation of victims, right? If a word is so terrifying and so scary that you can't even say it, right? Backing up because this is the internet, it's going to get clipped. Not to actually say it with the intent of being racist or hurting someone, but in a piece of literature that is considered to be one of the greatest works in modern literary history. In that context, right? If we have to go back and rewrite the past, you're teaching children to just be scared of everything, right? You're teaching them that if something is uncomfortable, it's bad and evil, and there's nothing you can learn from it. And in fact, like you're saying, we should confront the difficult and unacceptable past of this country instead of just glossing over it, because then we can have an appreciation for, yeah, those things are terrible. That should never happen again, right? And it was bad and wrong, and that's not what we believe today, and we don't support those types of ideas, and this is why, right? But if we gloss over that, how is someone going to learn from that? And then any new thing that they face that is uncomfortable or challenging, they need safe spaces from, and all this kind of stuff. And it just, where does it stop? You'd live your entire life just under constant threat of everything. And it's kind of ironic because human beings living in America today are more insulated from harm and actual threat than any other group of people who have ever walked the face of this earth. So even the roughest part of America is safer than most of the world has ever been at any point in history. So, here we are. But yeah, I don't really know where I was going with that other than, we're just perpetuating victimhood. And I think parents and teachers should stand for what's true and teach those harder lessons, leveraging things like that from a historical context.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have anything to add there, but I get pretty fired up about this.
Yeah. I mean, you can't. You need to prepare these kids to become adults, and we've extended adolescence in this country well into our 20s. How many 24, 25-year-old boys do we have in this country who are just pushing off responsibility and, the fact that, adulting is a verb now, and, and part of that is because we don't trust them with the truth and we don't treat them like adults. And so when we are telling kids like, oh, don't worry, we're going to keep you safe, and don't worry, we're not going to let you hear this word. And I mean, it teaches kids that like we're not preparing them for the real world. And I mean, it's a lie to say that a word is inherently evil. A word cannot be inherently evil. And I know that might offend some people, but it's the truth. And it's the intent behind a word that's evil. To say that a word is unutterable under any circumstance, no matter what, especially on the basis of your skin color, it's like we're going backwards. And look,
Right.
I don't wake up wanting to say F this or F that or inward this. I don't speak that way. I try to speak cleanly. I'm a Christian. I refrain from obscene speech. But as soon as you start departing from history and the written word, like as written, I mean, look what happens when we read the Constitution, or we read our own meaning into the Constitution, or we depart from the Constitution as written, or the Bible. It's like, what happens when you don't read the Bible as written, or you there's nothing but consequences when you choose to do that. And so a word can be sharp, a word can be used in an evil way, but you can conceive of a context where using a word to convey a certain message is necessary. Because if you don't, then you don't depict what life was really like, and I think that actually does a disservice to the people who actually suffered under racism.
Yeah, definitely. Especially when you're referring to this specific book,
Yeah.
right? It's the whole point of the book is to highlight the injustice of it all.
Hmm.
And because those things actually happened to quite a few people.
Yeah.
And it was an injustice. And so, yeah, I mean, if you just gloss over all that, I agree with you. You're basically erasing the memory of all these people who suffered
Hmm.
that we should be learning lessons from and not ensuring that it never happens to people again. So yeah, I mean, it's
Have
it's
you guys ever
essentially
seen?
this is a case of politeness does not equal kindness, right? So it you're trying to be nice, but you're not trying to be good, right?
Yeah.
And the actual good and moral thing here is to be like, look how horrible this was. This is why we don't do that anymore.
Have you
It
guys seen the
honors their
movie
memory.
42?
42?
The movie about Jackie Robinson?
I haven't seen it yet. It's
I
relatively
haven't
new,
seen it.
right? Mm-mm. No, not yet. I need to.
It came out a few years ago, but there's a scene where I think the Brooklyn Dodgers, they're going to Pittsburgh and they're playing a team, and the other coach from the opposing team is just ruthless. He is so racist, and every time Jackie is up to bat, he's spouting off racial slurs.
Yeah.
And he's a white guy, and you know he's saying the word because it's necessary to convey what Jackie Robinson actually went through. How silly would it be if they were trying to portray Jackie Robinson's life, but every time the white guy has to speak, they were just like inward, inward, inward,
Or said
they
like
just,
butthead or something,
or they just
Yeah.
like bleep it out. Like
Yeah.
it would, you wouldn't get the message
Right.
if you did that.
Yeah,
And
because I remember I have seen it now. 'Cause Chadwick Boseman stars as Jackie Robinson, right?
mhm,
Yeah, I have seen that, and it's visceral, right? You feel a very strong emotional, like repulsing feeling from what's depicted in that scene, and yeah, there's power in that, and it teaches the lesson. I mean, like if someone doesn't get if someone doesn't get that, like they're brain dead. You know what I mean? It's quite palpable. Yeah, you take that word out of it, now it means nothing. It doesn't teach anyone of what it was actually like for Jackie to have to stand in the face of that opposition and still deliver, basically being the best ball player in the country,
yeah.
with all of that against him. So, yeah,
So why
it would
can't
just
we read
diminish his
from a
memory.
so why can't we read from a book that's trying to do the same thing, So that's just one angle from all this, is like you can't depart from the word as written, and you distance yourself from what the author wanted you to feel. But then you have the whole, like we were talking about, the concepts of truth, it's telling kids like you can engage with literature honestly, and you don't it's your duty as a reader to do that. And don't let anybody tell you that the color of your skin, you can only engage with this book on the basis of whether your skin is white or black, and or you can only read this upon certain conditions, or you're not allowed. Like that is that the phrase "you're not allowed" is the most anti-educational statement I've ever heard in my entire life.
So, knowing that these challenges that we have with our public school system in America, your children are relatively young, so they're probably not quite ready for these kinds of conversations. But what can dads tell their children to learn from this, knowing that there is a baseline level of censorship and that we're losing more and more literature? What can a dad do to make sure that their children are still learning those critical thinking skills and gaining what you and I gained in school that even 10 years later, a lot of these kids just aren't getting anymore?
Yeah, I think dads have to just, live by example. The way you live your life, and that is, your kids are watching you, and they can snuff out, even at a young age, if something is insincere, or if you are, because they see you all the time, if you act a certain way versus how you talk or portray yourself. But, I think practically it's, don't try to hide history from your kids. You can read books as written, And, maybe there's some things that they might not understand at 4 years old, but, certainly when they're 8, 9, 10, if you come across something that makes you uncomfortable, but it's in the history, don't shy away from it. Make it an opportunity to teach your kids, because around, when they're with their friends or their own peer group and they're not guided by wisdom and experience, that's fertile ground for errors in thinking to be born. It's usually when kids are off, the blind leading the blind, but if you confront the difficult topics with your kids in an honest way and trust them with the truth, I think that usually pays off.
That's a really good recommendation. And another nugget of wisdom that my wife and I were given is, if your kid brings a difficult subject to you, maybe it's a word they heard, or something to do with the birds and the bees, or something depending on their age, right? School kids talk. Instead of just answering right away, ask them, well, what do you think that means, right? Because then they'll kind of show you from their childlike understanding of where they are on that line of understanding, because some topics are very nuanced, right? So they may say a word thinking, and what it means, they don't really know what it means. And so that's another great way to kind of confront those things and have open dialogue about what is true and what is good and moral, without kind of like going too far into the weeds, and then also keeping it appropriate to their maturity level. And it also trains them that, hey, you can bring tough stuff to me, kiddo. Like, I'm going to talk it through with you, because you want them coming to you with these types of situations instead of assuming they have the right answer. And then I would add on also, get physical media, right? We live in this digital age. There are episodes of South Park and Family Guy that you can't find anymore on streaming services because they say a bad word, and, however you feel about those shows, satire is a good thing in a society. It's good to be able to make fun of everything. Nothing is above criticism or critique, and that is a healthy kind of counterbalance to, authoritarianism, right? And so that's just an example that pops up to the top of my head. I'm sure there's many more, but yeah, get the books themselves, get the movies themselves, because like that Jackie Robinson example, they could go and edit it on Netflix, right? And now you can't hear the scene the way it was intended. So that would be a thing I add on.
Yeah, I like what you said, though. You don't want your kids trusting somebody else more than they trust you. And man, that's like, just thinking about that, that's like one of my worst fears now, that like my kids like trust somebody else their own age more than me, because I responded in a bad way when they brought me something out of genuine curiosity. It's like, oh, that's the last time I'm going to go to him with a difficult question, because look what. And so yeah, I think being caring in the way you respond with truth, but in a way that they'll want to come back with more questions.
So Matthew, next steps. I know you're probably taking a little break right now, taking a breather. Have you thought about what's next? Will you think about teaching again? Or are you thinking about going in a different direction? Have you started looking at the future at all?
Yeah. So, thank God that I'll still collect my salary for 2 more months, because that's just the way the teaching salary works. You get paid through the summer. But after that, I am trying to start my own podcast and to grow that. Through all of this, it's sort of given me a unique niche to speak about some of these issues, regarding free speech and education, and what's life like in the public schools. And I'm doing that right now, and that podcast is called The Great Reassessment. And I just try to have nuanced conversations about truth seeking. And right now I'm going to try to angle it with this unique experience I had. But yeah, I have some entrepreneurial ideas that are percolating, and I'm going to try my hand at maybe starting my own business. But yeah, for sure, taking a couple weeks to just sort of let the dust settle a little bit. And, I'm flattered that, people have been asking me to share my story, because I think it really highlights something that's really going on in our society today and in our public schools is like our ability to speak the truth in some of these institutions, or you face the consequences. And so,
Oh yeah.
um,
And I mean, it was happening in the military. I
yeah,
mean, it still kind of is, right? You gotta watch what you say. You gotta tap dance around the issues, and to me, that baffled me in the military. Is like, I'm an Army guy, right? So knuckle dragging grunt over here. Like, our job is to go kill things. This is not a nice environment. There's nothing nice about what we exist for. There's nothing polite or politically correct about what we exist to do. I hope we never have to do it, but when we have to do it, it's the ugliest thing a human can do to another human, right? Little weird that we want to try and like tap dance around hard conversations when our job is to literally go extinguish life. So, obviously I don't want that to be the case in our schools, but if we're allowing fear to be the culture, what are we actually training anyone? What are we teaching anyone in that situation? And I mean, the hypocrisy of it all, I think, is just pretty blatant. My stepmom is actually a principal in the state of Washington, so I've got a pretty good insight to kind of the insanity that's going on there in that state. And it's nothing good, right? It's not raising the next great generation of Americans. It's raising a lot of victims who have been taught a lot of crazy ideas that aren't going to help them. So really all we've done is instill fear instead of building strength, whether that's, strength of character, strength of intelligence, physical strength of actually exercising our kids. So, it's nowhere in history can you look at a organization, whether it's a government or some other kind of structure, where fear was the motivator and it turned out great.
yeah.
I mean, I'll wait for someone to give me an example, but I don't think it exists, at least not very healthy.
I know every time in my life where I've made a decision out of fear, it was not good. It usually ended up being very poor. And when you let fear sort of dictate educational policy, because we can't have too many people telling the truth or too many people helping these students think critically, I think it sends a chilling message to other teachers who are trying to do the same thing. And so, yeah, I'm refreshed that at least I know that I'm not going back. Like that door's been shut. And so I'm looking forward to just planning my life course now. And there's a lot of freedom in that. And even though we didn't get the result we wanted, it still feels like a victory because, man, the community really surrounded me because they had common sense. Like I showed up to this school board meeting and there was a big crowd already waiting outside the door. We had to fill 2 overflow rooms and an hour of public comments. And so it was clear that people believed I was doing the right thing, or that I certainly didn't deserve to be fired over this or lose my job.
So that clearly gives the indication then that this is, the few with an agenda trying to ram it down throats, because obviously the bulk of the community feels the opposite. And I'll just say this, like I said earlier, you're kind of standing up. One, I think you're probably it's a blessing in disguise that you're not going to be there anymore. But I think this is kind of one of those moments where enough of these types of things have happened over the past 5 years in this country that people are sick of it. They're sick of being kind of like squashed down by ideas, right? I don't really want to go into the weeds politically or anything, but they're tired of it, right? They want some normalcy again, and they want to be able to trust the institutions that we typically trust in this country. And so I think there's going to be stuff that starts happening as a result of your courage to get this going. So, I think other teachers may be a little bit more emboldened now to maybe start shifting policy or recommending changes and things of that nature. So I hope that is the case.
Yeah, if anything, maybe it's just that we don't have to walk on eggshells or feel like we're living in a surveillance state at all times. And, comedy's made some strides forward. I like some of the comedy that's shown up on my...
I mean, it's like the only thing that saved us, quite frankly. I mean, because everyone else was completely censored and deplatformed and everything, and somehow comics were the only one that didn't get touched.
Well, and it's one in particular. I mean, Dave Chappelle took a stand.
Yeah, they really, and I'm not even really a huge fan of him.
But they tried to cancel him, and they couldn't. He literally said, "Nope, I'm going to say what I want." And Netflix said, okay, you're a big enough star, we're going to go with you. And everybody was shocked. They were sure he was done, and it didn't happen. So at least there was a tide change there, and hopefully we'll see more of that with teaching, because who is supposed to be the truth tellers in our society if not the teachers? And so if you don't have the freedom to be honest, who has that freedom? It should be our teachers. Absolutely. So you're in a position now, speaking of having some freedom, to maybe comment on the educational system a little bit. Can you speak to, you taught for 3 years. Is there anything that you would absolutely change if you could wave a magic wand, aside from the truth thing? What could you do to make the public education system better in America? Is there anything that you've really noticed that, man, this drives me crazy, we could fix it if we did this?
Yeah, so I've been reading a lot of Neil Postman and John Taylor Gatto. Those are two authors that I really recommend anybody who wants to learn about the state of education in America. They have to read those two guys. And so
Weapons of Mass Instruction.
Weapons of Mass Instruction, Dumbing Us Down, Entertaining Ourselves to Death. Like, these are all really good books that they're timeless. You could read them today and you feel like they were just written last week. But if I had a magic wand, first thing I would do is I would pass school choice for everybody. So if you want to pull your kid out, right, of public school, the money follows the family. And so right now in the state of Washington, it costs like $20,000 per year per student. And with that much money, I'm just wondering, why are these kids not eating lobster and steak every day for lunch? Like, that is so much money. And what are we doing with all that? So, give parents 15 grand and let them do what they want with it to, for an educational purpose. Like, you can either enroll your kid in a private school, or they could stay in the public school, or you could homeschool, or whatever hundreds of methods are out there. But at least families would be in charge. So that, I think, would be step number one.
But Matthew, if you did that, then they wouldn't be dependent upon the government.
And, I have a magic wand. I didn't say people would like it, I guess, or that the government wouldn't put up a fight. Step number two is, I think you can completely alter what we think of as school. So right now, kids, they wait for a bell, they go to this class, they go to that class, they wait for the next bell, and they're only around kids their own age all day. So they're never spending time with children, they're never spending time with elderly people, and so they never get to glean off of their wisdom, and then they never get to see the future that's coming up after them. So, Neil Postman talks about this, is like, what happens when that takes place? It's like, you're living in a place where you forgot the past, you're forgetting the future, and you just live in a continuous present. And you're totally disconnected. So you're not living for anything to come after you, and you've forgotten everything that came before you. And what does that do to a person's psyche? And so I would just mix everybody together. I would have children, with seniors in high school, and like incorporate something where kids are getting these touch points with people that are not their same age. I think there could be a lot of benefits to that. And then I think the third thing is letting kids pursue passion projects. I'm not going to make a kid read something that, like, he's just going to sit there and go like this the whole time. What good is that? But if you can somehow find something that makes this kid come alive, maybe it's starting a business at 15 or 16 years old, or maybe it's starting a YouTube channel and he likes to interview people, let him start a passion project that he can get excited about, and where his creativity is not stifled. And let the kids who want to do math, and they're going to learn how to read. We don't have to be worried that they're not going to learn how to read. Like,
yeah. A friend of ours that we've had on the podcast, Matt Beaudreau, he's like, you want to know how you teach kids to read? You let them read.
Yeah.
That's it. End of curriculum. Like, you want to get them to love books, you just let them read books. Like, that's it. You don't force it down their throat.
This idea that how are they going to learn the basics? It's like, they will learn the basics if there's a need to know the basics. John Taylor Gatto says, he's quoting some studies like, it takes about 100 hours to become literate. 100 hours. And this
So
idea that,
like a month.
yeah, they're never going to learn how to read. Well, maybe we're actually holding them back from reading really great books because, these kids they're all moving together on one track. And some of the kids who want to go off and read great literature can't because it's like they're just stuck in this school. And I'd get rid of
The
all
conveyor
bells.
belt model.
Yeah. There'd be no
Yeah.
bells either. Like, I agree with John Taylor Gatto. He says, like, what's worse than, say you have a kid who's writing a great essay and then a bell rings. He's just to stop it. He's stop working on his essay and move on to the next thing. It's like a bell suggests that there's nothing worth continuing after this bell. And I think that really trains our minds to just comply instead of really trying to educate ourselves.
And it's impossible to get into deep work that way, right? It takes 20 minutes, right, to really focus, get deep, and then all of a sudden the bell rings and it's gone, and your great idea is toast. So I agree that would be a huge positive change. Do you see any positive technological changes that might happen over the next couple of years? Do you see AI and tech and all that as mostly a negative, taking away from attention span, or do you think there's an opportunity for kids to learn in a unique or different way from, say, an AI tutor or harnessing the power of large language models? Have you thought about that stuff at all?
I haven't dedicated much thought to it, and I'm probably not the best person to ask. My gut instinct, as I sort of survey the land, is that perhaps what we conceive of as like a brilliant student today will be very different 25 years from now. And we're just seeing like a shift in like the mediums that kids use to display intelligence. Right now we're measuring, can you read this book and can you express a valuable thought about it, and I'll give you a number to grade the quality of your thought. Like, it's just silly when you think about it like that. But with AI, like any tool, I think there's a good way to use it and a bad way to use it. And it's so easy to use social media and ChatGPT for ways that are not constructive. But, if you can use a tool in a way that's constructive, I think it could be really, there's immense potential there. But, do we have responsible people guiding these kids how to think about things properly? That's the bigger question, I think.
Yeah, it's all about responsible use. I agree. So here's a trick. Are you going to put your kids in public school after this? Or are you going to, are you thinking about going a different direction?
So I'm blessed that my wife, she's a stay-at-home mom, and she really wants to homeschool, and I want to be a part of their education too. So often I think dads like just, leaders can delegate, right? That's a thing that leaders do. But so often men will do so blindly, and they're never checking in, they're never like involved. And so
They're abdicating, they're not delegating.
yes. So abdication versus
Such a
delegation.
good point. It is a true abdication. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Because actual delegation means you still supervise and refine.
yeah, you're checking in, like what curriculum are we doing, and what's downstream from this. And so I want to be involved. Maybe I'm not teaching every single day, but maybe once a week, twice a week, and I'm involved. But yeah, we will not be putting our kids in public school. And it sounds like, I taught in public school. Is that hypocritical of me? And I'm just like, no, it's not. Like, these are my kids, and I'm going to do what's best for them.
Every teacher or retired teacher I know all told us, do not put your kids in public school. Every single one I know. There wasn't a single one who was like, yeah, it's great, send them to public school. So,
No.
I feel like maybe those who worked on the inside have the best position to speak on that. And the fact that not a single one I know, I'm talking like at least 10 people, different areas of the country, all said, yeah, don't do that. Just either homeschool or go to a private school.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I just look at like the education my 4-year-old has, right? Like, she has 2 parents who love her and spend a lot of quality time with her, and we do fun projects around the house. Like we garden, we have chickens, and my mom, she was a preschool teacher for 25 years, and she's worked with a lot of 4-year-olds, and like just the language development and the vocabulary, the sophisticated nature of some of the things my daughter says, like these are things that like a 6 or 7-year-old is saying, and I'm not saying that to like be prideful. I'm just saying like, man, I think this is every child is capable of this if they have.
Yeah. It's because they're exposed, like you said, they're not just with their own peer group the whole time. They actually see the differences.
Yeah.
And then I don't know. So curious, how much screen time do you give your 3 kids? Do you feel like it's very limited, or do you think it's a lot? Like, do you think that plays a role in their being a little more advanced?
Yeah, my kids they spend very little time on screens. We just for over a year we did not have Wi-Fi in our house, and we would go to the public library and we would rent DVDs if we wanted to watch a movie, and it created a family thing to do together. We'd all get in the car, we'd go down to the library and we'd peruse the DVDs, and we would rent some kids movies, but probably once every 2 weeks are we watching a movie with our kids. But we're just reading a lot of books, doing things outside, just playing. And then like if a kid gets sick, or we're we get a family stomach bug or something, it's like, cool, we're gonna watch a movie. But like my kids have never spent time in front of an iPad, and
Good.
I am trying my best to never let that be the case.
Yeah. I just saw a clip today of, I think his name is Greg Lukianoff. He wrote The Coddling of the American Mind. I think I got his name right.
Jonathan Haidt, I think, wrote that.
Jonathan Haidt and Lukianoff.
Yeah.
They wrote
The
together.
co-author.
So I
That's
forget
right.
if it was Jonathan Haidt or the other guy I saw on the clip. One of the authors. But they there's there's enough data now that shows, like, but the data point he shared was that we have kids now, when they get dropped off to go to school, they're not crying because they have to leave their parents. They're crying because they have to leave the tablet. And he just walked through this. Man, I wish I had saved the clip because I could have brought it up. But how it takes 3 weeks just for the brain to reset itself after being that like attached to a screen. And so it's so tempting because it does work, right? It does stop them crying, but then if you take it away, now they are crying. And so it becomes this highly addictive source of a child's life. What it's doing to their brain is extremely problematic. And so, yeah, I think parents fill that time with reading books to them or something of that nature, like do an art project, or like, I love that, going to the library. That's like the closest thing to going to Blockbuster that you can get, right? I missed those as a kid, going to Blockbuster to pick out the Friday night movie, right? That was like the thing. So anything like that where you're spending time together with them and they can explore different ideas teaches them to be bored. And being bored is a wonderful thing. That he also talked about this in the clip, that a person who has a constant need to never be bored is literally an addict. And imagination thrives through boredom, right? The wonder of things and creating new worlds in your mind or upstairs with your toys or whatever, that only happens if boredom hits first and they're forced to innovate. And that used to be something I did with my daughter. Was she's like, "Dad, I'm bored," and I would say, "Good, go find something to do." I wouldn't just like solve it for her. She has, well, I don't know what I can do. Well, you have your toys. You could draw. You could go outside. You can do this. Any of those things you can do as long as you want to. And after 3 minutes, she's off doing a million different things, and then she comes back and says, "Dad, look what I made," and everything. Right? Well, if I would have just given her a tablet, the creativity would have died before it even started.
Yeah, I was reading the other day in this Neil Postman book. I know I've been talking about him a lot, but he's talking about how like the tools you have at your disposal, right? Like it alters the way you see the world. If all you have is a pencil, everything is a list, right? You're going to want to write things down. If all you have is a calculator, everything's numbers. If all you have is social media, everything becomes a post. So like you start to look at every moment around you as like, is this worthy of sharing it and taking a picture and connecting it with this? And so like it actually changes the way for some like teenagers and stuff, right? Like who have this insatiable desire to be connected. They're not engaging with people in the moment, being still, reflecting on like what's actually being said. It's like, is what we're about to talk about or what are we about to do, is it worthy of me taking a video and posting it to my story? And every waking moment, you're analyzing everything that you see through your eyes in that way. And it's like pretty soon that just becomes the substance of your thoughts. And I don't even have to get started on TikTok where it's like it's training even adults, right? Like I struggle with this to some degree, but you get stuck in that scrolling, right? And this you're just searching for entertainment, and quite literally, like Neil Postman talks about, it's like we're entertaining ourselves to death. And it's just I don't know how much, like, what's the next step from TikTok? Like these are 3-second videos that are fighting to hold our attention spans, and they're actually shortening our attention spans. But like, how much further can that go? Like, how much more data can you squeeze in to
Fully immersive virtual reality that it'll be better than their life and they'll just resign themselves to living in that.
I think you're right.
I mean, I hate to sound that dystopian, but I mean, it's going to happen, right? It'll look that convincing. It'll feel that convincing that people are going to it'll be the new addiction, right? Instead of drugs or alcohol, it'll just be the eyeball implants or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So
No, I think that's right. It's like because to keep going down that path, it's like it has to be more exciting, more lively. It's like so. I think fully immersing your body into that is the only logical next step.
yeah.
And some people will check out and that'll be their whole life. But for those of us who have a higher purpose, having children, having these wonderful opportunities to experience everything with them, can you share an amazing moment that you've had with either all three or some of your children that you'll never forget, a core memory that if you were checked out inside the Matrix, you would play over and over in your head if you were ever unhappy?
So, I mean, just recently, I mean, there's so many. Like, it's hard to just pick one, and I know there's more, even though it's hard to just think of something on the spot. But like the other day, so I made a chicken coop just from scratch, right? Like it's bought wood from Home Depot, and it's this chicken coop that is on wheels and it can move around our backyard. And we have like 20 chickens now, and they're still babies, but we sort of released them all into the yard, and we were just there as a family, all 5 of us. And my 4-year-old and my 2-year-old just started running around chasing the chickens all across the yard. And it was just a beautiful moment because they're laughing like, and I'm ashamed that I eventually pulled out my phone and I started filming because like I really just wanted to have this moment, like, but for a solid like good moment, like I'm just sitting there watching my daughters run and chasing these chickens, and the chickens are chirping, my daughters are laughing, and the sun was setting. Like it was just a beautiful moment. And I mean, if you're just inside playing video games, you're never gonna have something like that. And but like I said, I think that was a good moment to take a picture, but it didn't. It was just a really quick thing. But then I quickly put it away to just enjoy the moment. But I mean, it was really amazing, and it just was like, this is what life's all about.
That's so beautiful, man. Those those little moments where your kids are just having this new sense of wonder about something they haven't experienced before are like the highest of highs as a dad. It's so cool to see those. How are you going to train your children to have the same kind of strength of character that you did? Because I think these problems are only going to get more challenging for their generation with the dawn of AI and things like that. I think a person of conviction is going to be more and more rare. So what are the ways in which that that you are going to instill those kind of principles in them to guide them to be able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to pray that God gives me the strength to live by example so that they see me live as somebody who has conviction. But then, like, I don't want them to only see me. I want them to be surrounded by other mature, wise people. And so being in a community where, like, we have people in our house, we're really involved with our church. And so, like, it's almost every week we have people in our home. And so seeing other people who can exercise, like, showing deep conviction for what they believe. And then I think helping them find, like, role models from the past that they love. If you don't have one person who's dead that you connect with, who stood on principle, who showed courage, who inspires you, I think you're just doing life wrong. And
So who's that person for you, Matt? Who's your hero from the past?
well, for a while it was George Washington. I was reading his biography, and I mean, the courage he showed, and during a time when, like, everybody was scared, and they just needed somebody who wasn't scared. And there's other people during that time as well, but, like, he's just really one person that shines out, where it became glaringly obvious who the leader was. And it's like, when this guy's around, everybody is quiet and we just listen. And, like, so, and if I thought about it, I could think of some more. But I mean, right now it's like Neil Postman and John Taylor Gatto. These are some guys who are really inspiring me as of lately. But to have somebody who's dead, who you can sort of summon back up from the grave when you read them or their books, like, and connect with them and have this conversation across time, like, and you have this special connection with somebody. I think everybody needs that type of person.
I agree. We should, strive for the ideal, even if we fall short.
Yeah.
That's how you force yourself to grow into a better version of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not comfortable. Just
do
like
you,
the
do
truth.
you guys have any heroes who are dead?
I would go with Cincinnatus, right? He was kind of the original George Washington. We named the city of Cincinnati after him. He was a Roman general who could have taken power and become emperor, and he chose not to. He gave it up. So Washington, Cincinnatus both, had the ultimate power, had what every man truly craves, right? Power is respect, and they decided that it was more important for their countrymen and for their legacy to give that up and allow someone else to take power in that situation. So it's so rare to see men who have the strength of character and courage to give up what at the time was considered the pinnacle of everything. And, America could have easily been King Washington and all the states would have been named after him, all that. And he chose not to. He said, no, I'm not doing it. I'm giving it up. And, we're going to try out this crazy new Republican democratic system. And, it has its faults, but I'm really glad he did it, because King Washington would not have been any better than England. So two very big heroes for me.
Yeah.
I've got two. Theodore Roosevelt, the original warrior poet. Just the way he lived, for one, but also the principles he stood for of how men should be, right? It's not good enough to just be strong. It's not good enough just to be smart. You need to be both the athlete and the scholar. And if you think about what's required of men, that's true, right? There are times where you need to be a warrior, and there's times where you need to be the lover. And balancing those two things is obviously a challenge, especially in today's day and age. But I think he set a pretty strong example for men to follow. And then another one for me personally, just because I was going into the military and wanted to be an officer and everything. So Major Dick Winters, he was in the 101st Airborne in World War II, ended up becoming the company commander, and then I think the battalion commander as a major. So obviously his persona was glorified in the show Band of Brothers, but I wanted to hold myself to a standard of what does great leadership look like in combat, and that was always one for me that just really stuck out. I was like, I can just be like that, it'll work out, So
Yeah.
that one's a lot more personal, not necessarily applicable to my daughter or something like that, but that one just stuck with me. I'm sure guys are gonna laugh at that and think it's a little cheesy, but again, by putting our bearings on an ideal, even if it is kind of a glorified, scenario of someone's life, great. It's that C.S. Lewis quote, right? Since there will be hardships, I forget the exact wording, but since there will be dragons, right? Let us tell our children of brave knights who stood against them. So that kind of idea.
Yeah. So it's funny you mentioned Dick Winters. This is actually kind of a funny story. So 8 years ago, like right before I joined the military, my friend lent me the Band of Brothers series on DVD. He's like, here, you need to go watch this. And I never watched it. I literally joined the military, served for 4 years, got out, taught for 2.5, 3 years, and it was only once we didn't have Wi-Fi, I was like, man, I still have these DVDs. And so we just ran through the whole Band of Brothers series. We watched it at night after we put our kids down, and it took us a few months, but like Dick Winters, man, I really just loved that character. They portrayed him so well in that show.
Yeah. I mean, like, if you tried to describe to a cadet or whatever, like, well, how do you lead your soldiers well? Right, do that. It won't be easy. It won't always be popular, but do that. So
yeah. I like that. For some, like, the phrase that's coming to my mind is like, when you sacrifice truth for comfort, you get neither. And I think good leaders have to honor the truth and be able to speak the truth, even when it's hard, because like any comfort that is not rooted in the truth is a false sense of comfort.
Right. It's a lie.
Mm-hmm.
You're living a lie. And eventually when you stack lie on top of lie, it's hard to keep them straight. And then it all starts to crumble down. So yeah, especially if you're in a position of leadership, living in truth yourself, and then also just being honest with your people. That's where you create culture.
Yeah, I think it was Jefferson, right, who said those who would sacrifice their essential liberty for a little bit of safety deserve neither. So similar, kind of idea there. So
they deserve neither, is what he said.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it was it Franklin or was it Jefferson?
Jefferson or Franklin. Yeah, we'll fight it out later and see who
we'll
got the
fight later.
right.
Who's right? Chat, let us know. Tell us in the comments who was right, Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Jefferson.
Exactly, I love it.
There you go. All right. Last thing, Matthew, where can people find you? Where can they check in with you and follow you? And obviously, we're excited to help you along in your new journey as well, and want to support you with whatever you do next.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you. Literally, like from the bottom of my heart, I'm honored to come on this show and chat with you guys. And Dustin, hopefully, we can actually meet in person soon.
I'm so excited. What a cool opportunity. Yeah, serendipity.
Sweet. If people want to follow, they can follow me on Twitter, on X. That's at realmastro21. And there you'll find updates. We have some big announcements coming out after this recent school board meeting. And if people want to stay tuned with kind of my story, they can follow me there. But if you like what we talked about today, people would probably really appreciate my podcast, which is, it's new, it's growing. But I got about 25 episodes so far, and that's called The Great Reassessment. And it's kind of an eclectic podcast about truth-seeking and pulling back the curtain on conventional narratives. I have amazing guests, and it's just really fun. I talk about history, economics, a little bit of Bitcoin, because I'm kind of into Bitcoin. And, now with what happened to me, I'm doing more education stuff like that. And I just had Warren Smith, and we talked about our experiences in education, and I think we're just going to lean a little bit towards that way a little bit. So yeah, Great Reassessment.
Awesome. So yeah, everyone go check that out, The Great Reassessment, and then go follow Matthew on X. Are you on any other platform? Or is that just the one you're focused on?
For my personal stuff, yeah, it's mainly X, but then YouTube and Spotify is where they can find the podcast. But
awesome,
man, I gotta catch up on your guys' episodes, because this
yeah,
I think
awesome. This is I think yours is going to be like close to 120. I got to do the math again on where we're at. We're getting up there in episodes, so yeah,
that's so cool. I'd love to.
It's exciting.
Yeah, I'd love to stay in touch with you guys.
Oh, absolutely. Well, You're gonna meet Dustin's, giant self here in a couple days. It looks like, and
Are you tall,
yeah,
Justin?
I'm sure we'll be.
I've been told I'm tall. Yeah.
He's a pretty big dude. Like what, 6'4", 240 or something like that?
So that's my playing stats.
Big
Yep.
boy. Very hard to miss. So yeah, that's the beauty on camera. I get to be taller than Dustin, right? So that's why it's fun to podcast virtually. But no, I'm jealous you guys get to meet face to face. But Matthew, I'm sure that your podcast is going to thrive through this, and definitely want to watch your journey and help you along the way in whatever way we can. So I've got some ideas for people you need to meet that we'll talk about backstage. But any closing thoughts for the audience, man? Because this has been really inspiring for me to know that there are other people out there willing to take a stand. And yeah, it's truly been an honor for us to host you here today.
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And I imagine there's a lot more people out there who maybe their story didn't blow up, who are fighting for truth, who are fighting for free speech. They're fighting for the freedom of expression in the classroom, and they're in school classrooms, and they're working really hard to serve kids. And so, this is just as much for them as it is for me. And so, if we want to make our country a great place to live and our communities strong, it's like we have to fight for the truth, and we can't give up an inch.
I agree. Hold the line. Hold the line, dads. And so with that, let's get climbing the mountain of fatherhood together, and we will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching this episode of the podcast. If you're on YouTube, drop a subscription to us, and if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, please leave us a review. It helps greatly. If you are also ready to level up as a man, check out Elite Sentinel Coaching, our program designed specifically for men, where we forge men into leaders. We turn cowards into kings, weaklings into warriors. Become the hero in your story. Join us today.